Guys and gals, Stewie's Wrestling Podcast is the hottest thing going in 2020. It's going to be the hottest thing going in 2021. And if you miss out on riding this train, guess what? You're not a fan of pro wrestling, and you're not a fan of anything that's hot, because this is a hot commodity. Check out Stu's Wrestling Podcast.
You're listening to Stu's Wrestling Podcast. It's time. Your host, Stu Palmer.
We have a huge guest for episode 135 of Stu's Wrestling Podcast, and it's none other than UFC Hall of Famer, Feuds Wrestling Hall of Famer, the world's most dangerous man, Ken Shamrock. Ken polarised both the sports of pro wrestling and MMA. He had countless records in the UFC. You'll get to hear about that and his pride in breaking pay-per-view numbers and figures when he was prevalent in the UFC. We also look into his WWF, WWE career, how quickly he got a title shot against Shawn Michaels back at the Generation X, the pay-per-view in 1997. His King of the Ring run as well. We cover that, and also fan questions from you guys too. Some good MMA questions and some good pro wrestling questions. A good mix on this episode today with Ken. We're crossing both codes and it's going to be amazing. So, without further ado, here he is, the world's most dangerous man, Ken Shamrock, on Stu's Wrestling Podcast today. Here we go. My guest today is an MMA legend of pro wrestling, a Hall of Famer in the UFC, also in the Hall of Fame for Feuds as well. Intercontinental champion in WWE. Tag team champion in WWE too. It's Mr. Ken Shamrock. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on today, sir.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
I'm going to open with 1997. Now, Bret Hart is my favourite of all time. When you were guest referee, I wasn't aware of UFC prior to you coming in when you came into WWE. So just being in Chicago that night, Ken, with Austin and Bret for that iconic match that we, still love years later, and your role in the match, man.
Yeah, it was interesting too, because I was, very, very green, coming into this match. I think I did one kind of warm up. I'd been fighting and capturing belts in Japan and the United States and the MMA world, and then to go into the pro wrestling at that level, which I'd never been at before. That was the top level of talent, and to be put in that spot was uncomfortable, because here you had Bret Hart and you had Stone Cold, which were two really, in some people's minds, the greatest wrestlers of all time, going at one another, and you got this Ken Shamrock coming that has no experience whatsoever at this level. And so going into that match, I was uncomfortable. I wasn't sure whether or not I could pull it off. Like, I'd never really acted much before. I never really, understood characters and how to play them off. And so going into it, I was like telling myself, I hope I don't screw this up, because like I said, the level of talent was there. But I would say probably 5 minutes into the match, I completely forgot that I was reffing a wrestling match. I got so into it that the match became real to me, because those guys were so good at getting after one another and doing the things they did. They were connecting and they were hitting each other and they were going after each other. It was very physical. And for me, I felt right at home coming out of the MMA world, going into that wrestling match, and them guys putting on that kind of show.
How was it being in Chicago as well? We know how iconic it is there. The crowd, how did it feel with the crowd? Obviously, I know you've been in front of crowds with the MMA anyway prior to that. But yeah, how hostile a Chicago crowd can be. How did you burst off the crowd, man?
Chicago's great because they're an aggressive crowd. And whether you're a heel, babyface, they're going to come after you. And that's what you want with fans. You want them to engage. Even if it's bad, you still want them to engage with you, because that helps you with being able to be more excited about putting your match together, going in and putting on a show. Chicago was awesome because, like I said, the fans were so engaged. Even when I was in the match, and they hardly basically knew me from the MMA world, but a lot of them didn't know me in the wrestling world. So I got a lot of support after that match. Going into the locker room, doing a meet and greet after that, meeting some of the fans. They were awesome, but the fan base inside the arena was unbelievable.
I can only imagine. Friends of mine have gone over to events in the stadium, in the arena, and they just said how awesome it was to be there. Ken, going into Raw on the 7th of April of 1997. Now, I had the Best of Raw Volume 5 on VHS. I got it with some Christmas money one year. And your bout, the no-holds-barred bout with Vernon White, obviously Lions Den member at the time, it was very quick, wasn't it? You reffed and then you were in that no-holds-barred match. I always remember seeing that on VHS. I must have watched that VHS 500 times, I would say.
Yeah, I think it was a shock to most people because they weren't seeing what they normally would see.
Yeah.
And so I was able to really let people know, the ones that didn't know where I come from, let them know who I was. As far as being a wrestler, pro wrestler, I was going to come in and be the world's most dangerous man, Ken Shamrock, from the world of mixed martial arts and no holds barred. And that's what they got to see that night. Then I got to do the Vader match. So they really got to see who Ken Shamrock was going to be in pro wrestling.
Absolutely. Now, you were thrust into the main event. We're talking like December of 1997 with Sean at the Degeneration X pay-per-view. I so badly wanted you to win that match. Obviously, off the back of Montreal, my hero was gone. We didn't really know what was going on. We were a lot younger, but yeah, I was so behind you to beat Sean that night. But yeah, you were thrust into the title picture. It's very quick turnaround for you, wasn't it, coming into the WWE?
Yeah, it was a roller coaster ride for me because I was moving so fast. And then I got, into that title shot thing pretty quick. And then all of a sudden it went away. It just kind of fizzled out. So it was, like I said, it was a roller coaster. But when I look back on it, I look at all the people that we had in the Attitude Era, it was stacked. So it wasn't anything that was pointed at me. It was more of I think, an issue with just the talent that we had. There was just so many really good guys. It was so hard. I'm almost sure it was probably pretty difficult for people trying to write these scripts and these storylines to be able to keep up with everything that was going on.
How good was Sean? How was it getting in there with him, relatively early on in your run there? How did you feel with him? How were your dealings with Sean? We've heard a lot over the years about how he was back then. He's a changed man, as we all know. But at the time, how was it working with him? Was it easy for you?
Yeah, I never had issues with Sean. Sean always was good to me. I was good to him. He treated me with respect. When we got in the ring, I was very appreciative that he was bumping for me and that he was giving me these different opportunities in there. So, I know sometimes when Sean gets in there against some other guys, he eats them up because he can't. He's that good. But with me, man, he shared the ring with me and he put me over in different places. So I've never had issues with him. I've always gotten along with him, and I appreciated the time I had with him in the ring.
Absolutely. Another accolade that I didn't manage to get in on the intro. We're going to talk about accolades that you had across combat sports and WWE. But yeah, winning the King of the Ring in 1998, man. How was that? And working The Rock, I loved it. I loved it with The Rock. And I wanted you to beat The Rock as well. I was very much for the face Ken Shamrock back then.
Yeah, it was interesting because when they let me know that I was going over, it was pretty exciting for me. And so being able to go in there and work with The Rock, we were both kind of, cutting our teeth, trying to figure out what direction we were going to go in pro wrestling. And, being able to have that match with him really, I think, set the tone for both our, storylines and set us up for being able to move forward and have some great matches. So for him, it was, I think, a learning experience for him. And for me, it was also a learning experience. But the match, if you watch the match, man, I that was a great match. I mean, I really loved that match. I thought it was really well done. We could put that up against any of the great matches.
Could you have foreseen how stratospheric The Rock was going to be even then? I know they were bringing him through the mid card to get him up to the precipice at the top. But yeah, but The Rock and what you felt at the time there in 1998, you worked him so extensively.
Yeah, people ask, that was probably my favorite time. I had a lot of great matches, and I was truly blessed, man, to be working with all the top stars. It was awesome. But me and The Rock actually had chemistry. And so we were able to really put together some great matches. The Rock is a lifer for pro wrestling. I came in as a hobby, something that I wanted to do. It would be fun, and to see whether I could do it or not. Because I know I tried it on earlier in my career, and then I end up getting into, fighting and other things, which took off. So I went back to it, wanted to see whether or not I could literally be at that level. And fortunately for me, I could, and I had a great run. But, I think Rock had his vision set on moving and being one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. I had the same mentality, but I also had other things that were waving in my mind at the same time, because I left MMA because I had to, because of the financial situation the UFC was going through at the time. So I needed to go somewhere else to make the money. I needed to support the lifestyle I created. So I went there kind of, not because I didn't want to or I wanted to, it was because it was a necessity. But once I got there, man, I fell in love with it, and it was just so awesome. But it was still that thing in the back of my mind of whether or not I completed my journey in MMA. So I think that held me up from really being able to achieve the level of success at capturing that belt. It's because there was always something in there. It felt like I hadn't finished the other career I started.
Absolutely. We're going very chronological here, Ken. I am going to flip-flop. I'm going to go back as well, but staying with WWE in the run there. Going into the corporation, I was like, Shamrock's heel now. Oh, I was like, no. Just how was that pitched to you initially, through Vince, and how that was formulated? I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, basically, I just had to be myself, and then whoever they paired me with, whatever kind of storylines that they wrote, I would naturally fit in with that too. I could be the heel or babyface because I didn't play either one. It was literally just the situations I was put in, whether I was going to be a heel or a babyface, because of my character and because of who I was. It didn't matter, because all it took was them to turn the story around just a bit, put me up with some other people, and all of a sudden I'm a heel. So I don't think I was ever really truly a heel, and I don't think I ever truly was a babyface. I was just that guy that kicked everybody's ass.
Yeah, man, absolutely. You had a run, obviously, I said in the intro, your tag team title run with the boss man, with the Great Ray Trailer. How was that? How was it tagging, going into that from singles? I'd love to hear about I'd love to hear how it was with the big man, and he was so well respected, and we lost him too soon, Ken.
Yeah, the boss man was a genuine dude. I got to meet him towards the end of his career when we were tagging together. Just a really good guy. Helped me out quite a bit whenever I needed to ask questions. He was a great leader in the ring. So he was one of the good ones, like Owen Hart, just a good dude. Worked hard, appreciated his craft, loved the fans, and then loved the people he worked with. And he gave his all when he went in there. He wanted to put together the best match he could. So I really appreciate him. I appreciated working with him.
No, hearing from you guys being in the ring, always hear he's, for such a big guy, working with him, it's like light as a feather for you guys. Obviously, fan perspective, what we're seeing, but yeah, just the guy said just how careful he was and how he took care of his opponent.
Yeah, he was. When you watch him, it looks like he's hurting people, right? I mean, because he's just got that attitude and that aggressiveness, and especially when he was healing. I mean, he was just mean, right? But outside of that, dude, he was just a big teddy bear. He's just a really good guy.
That's cool, man. I'm glad I've asked about him. I loved him growing up. Absolutely. Now, the Union, Ken. I was buzzed when they put you guys together. Mankind, obviously Mick Foley, Big Show, and Test. Why did it not go longer? Because I was buzzing for that when they put you guys together, and I thought these guys are going to have a long run as a faction. So yeah, just how they got you together, but also why was it, put to the side so soon, man?
I think it has to do with when I talked a little bit earlier about just having so much going on. There was so many storylines, so many things happening that there was a lot of different writers doing a lot of different things for storylines, and for whatever reason, that one there, they just decided they were just going to pull it, because remember, there was a lot of stuff happening during that time. So I just don't think there was any effort or mind. It was just something they thought they would try to put together. When they did, they just kind of lost focus of doing anything more with it. It just fizzled out. And so it was a lot of that. That was kind of my career, really, if you think about it. It was almost like they pushed me to a point, and then they didn't know what to do with me after that. So they just put me with people just to do it. So I was kind of that guy, and some of the storylines that we were put in with factions or teams and things like that, that just kind of lost focus of any of the writers because they had other things that they were focused on.
It would have really helped Test at the time as well, establishing him. Big Show had only been in the company a couple of months, hadn't they, after coming over from WCW. In my mind, as a fan, it was like, this could be amazing, going up against the heel factions and stuff like that. I really thought it was going to have some longevity initially.
Yeah, like I said, I think they just lost that direction of where they were going to go with it. Because again, like I said, there was a lot going on in those times, a lot of celebrities, a lot of superstars. And so that happened quite a bit with me, and different storylines I was involved with. It was almost like it just didn't get the focus it needed.
I'm going to go back, obviously, years later, obviously, when you've done interviews and I've seen stuff over the years, you were in pro wrestling, as you alluded to earlier, in the late 90s in the late 80s to the early 90s. So, yeah, I'd love to hear about that and that time, prior to WWF, WWE, because I didn't realize until years later that you were, I just thought it was combat sports, and then into WWE.
Yeah, no, I actually started with Buzz Sawyer, where I did training with him in Sacramento. I drive up from Reno with my dad, and we go down there and we train, sort of. But Buzz was going through some hard times. I know he's working over in Japan at the time. He'd go over there every now and then. He'd come back. And so when I went down to a school to work out, we went through this little tryout that he put me through. And I remember rolling with him on a wrestling mat, like collegiate. And he was very, very strong. He was very, very good. I could tell at one time he was state champion. But I dominated him after about 10 minutes of us going after it, right? But before that, it was pretty competitive. But I just got the best of him in the end. Well, Buzz's idea that he came up with, he's always this guy trying to find out ways to make money. His mind just works that way. He would do these tryouts, and he would bring these guys in, and they would pay him, I don't know, I don't know the exact amount, but it was a few $1,000s. And so he would tell me, like he did with me, he said, just go with them and make them quit. Because that's what he was trying to do with me. It was because I went down and tried out, paid money. He was trying to roll and just stump me, because he would do it with everybody else, and he'd just keep the money because they quit. Well, once he couldn't do that with me, he was like, okay. He brought me in, but I remember going there, and I wasn't learning anything. He was teaching me how to bump. He was teaching me how to do these little things. We didn't even have a ring. We were doing it inside a racquetball court. And so he had these mats down. So I remember trying to take a bump on the floor was brutal. And so he was just doing all these little things, talking about psychology, but not doing anything. We would go up every single weekend and do nothing. And so after a while, he came to me and he goes, hey, I got these, I'm going to bring in the guys. I'm going to start doing a tryout. I'm going to start a wrestling school where we'll have a ring and all these other things. So he started trying to tell me how he's going to do all these things, which I didn't understand, because he only had 2 other guys there besides myself. And he was teaching us lockups and headlocks and all these things, but on a collegiate wrestling mat, like there was no ring. So then he says he's going to do these tryouts, and he wants me to be the guy that goes in and tries them out, because I didn't understand at the time. And he charged him all this money, and he said, I want you to make sure they don't make it. And then it clicked with me at the time, well, that's what he's trying to do with me, but it didn't work. So I go in there, he had some big dudes come in there, guys that played football, guys that wrestled, guys that boxed, guys that done all these different things. They want to be wrestlers, and I would go in there and I would stretch them. And they would quit, and then they'd walk away, and they lost their money. And I did that for like 6 months, literally beating them up. And he would kick me down $300-$400 to pay for my gas and then food, whatever, when we were coming up there and doing that. And my dad, after a while, said, this isn't working. He goes, we got to find something else. So he ended up calling down and found a place in Mooresville, North Carolina, which was Nelson Royals and Gene Anderson's wrestling school. And of course, we went down there, and I went to go do the tryout. In my head, I'm thinking they're going to, because, my first experience was that. Well, I went down there, and Nelson had this ring and this warehouse and this property out there. And I was like, okay, this looks a lot different. But then he had us run out in these dirt clods. Like, there was probably 7 or 8 of us trying out. And so he had us run for like a half hour. Then he had us do all these different calisthenics and push-ups and everything. And I knew what he was doing. He was trying to wear us out. And of course, I didn't care because I was always in really great shape. So I would push it, and I was running, and I was kind of crushing everybody there. Well, then he brings us into the wrestling warehouse where the ring is. He goes, okay, get in the ring. And a couple guys get in there, and he says, no, just one. And so then he brings in this guy. He's probably about 6'2", 6'3", kind of stocky. He goes about 230, 240. And so he gets in the ring, and he says, I want you guys to wrestle for however long I tell you to. Just go until I tell you to quit. And then I'm thinking in my head, they're going to try to beat us up and make us quit. I mean, because I've been through it already. I was like, okay. So this guy wrestles with the first guy, and he ends up making the dude quit. And then he tells me to get in there. And so he has another guy get in, who was another kid there that was supposedly, because I was pretty stocky, pretty big. And so he put in a kid that was better than the one that just went in, and a lot bigger too. So we go at it, and I just beat the snot out of the dude, just tore him up. and so that Buzz says, okay, good job. And the other kids that went through it, there was 2 of them that passed besides myself. So it wasn't a thing where they were trying to beat people up. They were literally, genuinely, guys that were going to make it had to pass these tryouts. And if they couldn't, they didn't. And so they gave them the opportunity to pass. Some of them just gave up because they didn't have the cardio. But there was me and 2 other people that had made it. And so once I made it, that's where I really started. I think Nelson saw something in me. I won 2 tough man contests during my time down there that I fought in outside of that. So he saw an opportunity with a legitimate guy who was truly somebody that had some skill behind him, like myself. So he pushed me. And I think I would say my first match was with Nelson. I mean, I literally had my first match with him. He went in with me, and we worked together, and he was the champion. He beat me. But, it was a great experience because I got to go with somebody that had a really good hand and helped me understand what it was like. I would say 6 months later, I ended up winning the strap. And after I caught the strap, I think a year or so, he sent me to Japan. So I got to go down with Baba's group and work with the Japan guys for 6 weeks. I was there for 6 weeks and learned a lot down there. And this was in a year and a half of time of actually going into pro wrestling. And of course, as we know now, the history is I met some people like Dean Malenko, who knew the Shoot group, the hybrid type pro wrestling group, where I got connected, and I went down and did the same thing with the tryout, and ended up having my first match with those guys and never looked back after that, because I knew even though that was pro wrestling, a hybrid pro wrestling at the time, it was still, you were still doing things that would work, like legitimately in a shoot would work. And so for me, I fell in love with that. And then of course we see where it went, where myself, Benaki, Suzuki, when they came to me and wanted me to join their group, they basically were saying, let's see what it looks like if it's real. Like that hybrid pro wrestling, let's make it real. And that's where Pancras came in. So that's what you get when people always wonder what would it be like if wrestling was real. Well, watch Pancras.
Absolutely. How was it going to Japan the first time? Culture. I've asked several guests on this show who've been over. Just they love it. They love it. But how was it for you? From your psyche, your perspective, going over there from the States the first time?
Yeah. I mean, because I hadn't really been at a level of competing in front of large fans, obviously football and things of that nature. But when you're talking about like something like that, it was a major production. I was never really involved in that. So I didn't understand the difference between competing in the US crowd and competing in front of the Japan crowd. Because in Japan, they were quiet and they would be watching and they would ooh and awe at the same time. And I think for a lot of people, I found out as I got farther into my career, would stress out in matches because they weren't screaming and yelling and making noise, so they thought that they weren't performing well. So then they would end up pushing themselves too hard and they would get tired. But for me, I kind of that was norm for me, was to go in and work in front of 17,000 people and be able to hear a pin drop until you did something, right? So the fans really observed. It was very different because they literally observed every little thing that was going on. And then they would measure your talents and your strengths and your weaknesses. And so it was really, for me to start out that way, it was true blessing, because when I came to this, when I was competing in the States, it was like complete opposite. It was like, it was loud and screaming and yelling. And it was like, then I really got amped up.
It's amazing. It's just amazing what you've done, man. Just everything, all your accolades. Amazing. I'm going to fast forward to UFC. Tito Ortiz will be later. We've had a question we have from somebody. I will save Tito for later, but going back to like 93, Dan Severn, Don Fry, the Gracies, Royce Gracie, just UFC, the early portion there, and just how it was, the tournaments and stuff, man. And just, I'd love to hear about it. I've watched so many fights over the years. I love going back into the history, especially with your fights.
Yeah, I would say it was like the Wild Wild West, where they were trying to bring law into cities and states. And there was these gunfights happening all the time and trying to figure out who's right, who's wrong. And, no, you can't do that. And, yeah, you can do this over here. That's what it was like in the early UFCs, because whatever state we went to, there seems like there was always something that UFC had to jump through to get it to happen. Even though months in advance, they were cleared to have the show. But once they got to the month and the advertising, then you would start getting all this political uprise about having that event there, because everybody thought it was like human cockfighting. And unfortunately, people truly didn't understand the skill sets that went into doing this kind of stuff like we know today. But it was wild, because we would go to these places and, everything would be all peachy. And next thing you know, they would take out punching, or if you were going to punch, you had to put a glove on. And, then they shut it down. And you have to move the octagon overnight to another city, set it up and fight the next day. And that happened. It was crazy. And I think that one of my experiences that I will never forget and really set the tone for where UFC is today was the very first event I went to. I didn't believe it was going to happen, because back in 93, we had sanctioning bodies. Nobody would strike a wrestler, or a boxer wouldn't try to take somebody down. It was really separated. The disciplines were in boxes, and you just didn't go out of those boxes. You stayed in your box. And so to be able to have an event like that where it was a no-no, you just didn't do that. But I thought it broke the silence of people talking about which sport is the greatest, which discipline is the greatest, who would win if they did this and that. There's always those talks, but they were never brought out. And I thought this was great, because now you literally have this thing where you're saying, let's find out. Art Davies like saying, hey, let's find out. Let's find out what discipline really is the best. Now, understand this. The Gracies were doing this for 50 years. Hoyce have been doing it for 20 plus years. This type of stuff, like Knowles Bard, this stuff. So for everybody else going in, you're like, yeah, like I want to do it, but what does it look like? And because we have sanctioning bodies. And so going into this, I went to Japan. I defended my title over there. I go into Denver, Colorado. I fly in, I think it was 3 days. I'm not sure. It's been a while, but I remember just going in right after me fighting. And I get there, and no one has ever understood this, because even in the States, there was nobody trained other than the Gracies like this. So going in, nobody had the mixed martial arts discipline except myself because I was fighting over in Japan. And so going into this, it was so much unknown. And I remember Hoist walking around in his gi. I was like jammas to me. Like, why are you? It's a day before. What are you doing? And it was just like, he looked like a little boy. And like, man, you guys are going to get sued, man. Somebody's going to die here. Because if this was going to happen the way they say it was, which in my mind, I'm like, it can't. There's just no way. Especially seeing some of the guys that were there, other than Gerard Godot, I just felt like, wow, this is going to turn into a wrestling event, pro wrestling event. But it didn't. I mean, like, the closer we got to it, the more real it became. The only issue I had was when I signed up for this with Art Davies, they told me there were no rules. And I meant like kicking them in the head when they're on the ground, elbowing them, headbutting them, all these. He said, yep. He says, the only thing you can't do is bite. And I was like, or eye gouge, no biting, no eye gouging. And I was like, but if you do, they don't stop the fight. They'll just fine you. I'm like, fine you? You were only making $1,000 for the opening fight. It's like, what do they got to lose? If they win the fight, they get more out of it. So I'd pull somebody's eyeball out or bite their cheek off just to win, right? It's like they got the win, period. So it was really like the Wild Wild West. Anything goes. And so when they had the rules meeting, I was discouraged because I was told you can do whatever, even bite and eye gouging, but you get fined, but it won't stop. So I'm thinking this is literally a no holds. Why are we having a rules meeting? And so we go and have the rules meeting, and then lo and behold, they took my shoes away, which is something that I use. I've never been on a mat without shoes, which is now is normal, but back then, until you experience it, it's very, very slick compared to wearing wrestling shoes. So it was completely odd for me not to have them on. And then they wouldn't let the strikers wrap their hands with tape. Like, they wanted to take their hands. They said no. But they let Art Jimmerson wear one boxing glove. And I was like, what's going on here? Like, so it just, to me, but you're there, right? And so as they're doing these things, in your head, you're going, there's nothing we can do about it because they'll just replace us with someone else. And I don't want to be replaced. I want to do this. So, but that was all of that whole thing, that experience right there was very disappointing because I felt like it tarnished the legitimacy of that tournament by putting certain stipulations in there that gave other people disadvantage and gave other people advantages. And I thought that was unfair considering everybody else was already at a disadvantage because we'd never done anything like this before. Mm-hmm. That, Hoist and his family had been doing this for 50 plus years. Hoist with 20 years of experience under his belt. There was no need for them to do that. I think they would have been just fine with everything being the way they said it was going to be and let it play out and let's see what happens. But unfortunately, it didn't happen that way. But it doesn't take away what we experienced. I remember watching that first fight with Gerard Godot. Unfriggin' believable. If it was me or Hoist that started that thing, people would have walked out of the arena because they would have said, that was fake. That's not real because ours didn't look real. Mm-hmm. But that kick to the face, man, you cannot deny that. That was real. And that to me is the thing I remember the most about the UFC and my experience, other than titles. I enjoyed all the titles, but I think that right there really set the tone for me. And I got so excited that this was legitimate, real fighting, and that I didn't have to wonder whether or not it was going to be real or not.
What a pain in the arse John McCain was. Just from my watching clips more latterly, I wasn't watching it at the time. I don't even know if we were getting it in the UK. What a pain in the arse. You were saying about governing bodies. You can't go into this state. You can't go into that state. What were you thinking as a fighter? That it was just restrictions galore, wasn't it? I know it was the early days, but did it piss you off?
Well, I think it got a lot of us frustrated because, again, we were the ones trying to prepare for the fights and then constantly having to jump through hoops to satisfy state laws. After they had already been granted to do the fights there, then they would come in, 48 hours before the fight or a week before and tell you, oh, you can't do this. So it was very, very frustrating for everyone, but for Bob Meyerowitz and the money they were spending to try to put these things on didn't go to the fighters, didn't go to the production. It went to these attorneys because they were fighting constantly trying to keep this thing go through there. And that's why I think it's a shame that we don't recognize Bob Meyerowitz and Art Davies, Campbell McLaren. I mean, there's, and I know I'm forgetting some of them, but there's just a lot of guys that were constantly trying to keep UFC alive and spend a lot of money doing it so that we have what we have today, because it could have easily been shut down if those guys would have just backed up and said, okay, I quit, I give up. We're going to go do something else and shut it down. They would never be around again because there's no way that the state would or people would allow it to come back up again. They would have shut it down, make sure it stayed down. But those guys fought through. They made it work, and it cost them dearly to make that happen. And so for that, I'm always appreciative of what those guys have done, because we have what we have today, and I have a legacy and a Hall of Fame career because of it.
And look at the accolades from buy rates from events as well. You set so many records. It's just amazing, and countless times. I mean, it wasn't just once or twice. You were a pioneer. In every facet of it. In my mind.
Well, that's where I think that because it's been so long, a lot of these fans say I'd never won a title. And it's like, what are you talking about, man? I won so many titles. It's crazy. But it's because it's been so long ago, they don't understand it or recognize it. But at the same time, I was also the best fighter in the world, ranked #1. And so during those times, it was like, I think every single time for almost a year or 2 years, every time I stepped into the cage, I broke pay-per-view records. It was like one time after another. Each time I would always raise the bar higher and higher so that those records were being broken all the time. And even when I had fights with Royce Gracie, Dan Severn, Tito Ortiz, every single time that I was going in there, records were being broke. And I had different opponents doing it. So a lot of that stuff kind of gets swept under the rug because it has been so long ago. But again, I still go back to the early stages of, the guys that, the pioneers of this thing, the guys that were spending the money, going to court, fighting to keep UFC alive. Those are the ones that we have to be appreciative, because they could have easily just walked away, because they made a lot of money in the early days with doing the UFC. They could have walked away from it and just said, okay, we're done. But they didn't. They fought through it, got so deep into debt because of the bills and stuff they had with fighting the laws. They ended up selling it, obviously, because they couldn't continue to keep doing what they were doing. But thank goodness the Fertittas came in. They had a lot of connections with the commission. They had a lot of connections with sanctioning it. And we are where we are today. But without those guys in the early stages, the pioneers of this, we wouldn't have what we have.
Absolutely. It's crazy just how it evolved, and like I say, where it is today. I tell you what, I've got to ask you about our UK fighters and how prevalent they're becoming. They were having to go over to America to train, and now there's a lot of places where you can train over here to a high level. Just like the likes of, I don't know if you've seen much of Tom Aspinall at heavyweight, whether you've had chance. He's a standout. Obviously, I know we got injured against Curtis Blades, and Leon Edwards getting the welterweight title as well. Just your thoughts on UK MMA and, thrusting themselves to the top in UFC.
Yeah, I think it's awesome, to be able to see not just, England, but countries all over the world, that you're starting to see that mixture of talent. And it's not just locked into the US. I mean, it's everywhere. And the talent is unbelievable. That we're seeing coming out. So it's a national experience for people, and it's been going on now for 30 years. And now we're starting to see the benefits of that, where people are now training from the time that they're 10 years old till they're 22 or 23 years old. and you're seeing the excellence of that. For a long time, like myself, I didn't start till I was 29 years old. That's pretty long, but I was able to do a lot in that short amount of time. But now you're seeing these guys start at 10 years old, 5 years old, even with just the basic stuff. So now we're starting to see that. We're starting to see that level of talent with people that have been training that long and getting in there and actually performing. And for me, it's exciting to see, because I think that we haven't seen the best of it yet. I think that once we get another organization that will compete with the UFC, I think then you're going to start seeing the level of talent and the level of your experience at watching these fights increase, because now you have competition, and it's definitely an international event. And so it's come a long ways since I stepped in there in Denver, Colorado, and the roughness of what everybody knew to where we are now is incredible.
It's so cool. I'm from Wales, and I tell you what, the guys down in the south that have come into the premier organisation and have done so well. Jack Shaw being trained by his father, he had a loss in his last fight, but just to be on the, being able to go to America to fight, it's not just on a London card, which you can't get tickets to the London event. They just go. It's crazy.
Well, what I'd like to see, because I think that England is definitely one of the powerhouses in the MMA market, I would love to see a competition with an event there. I mean, like, have someone down there put an event together like the UFC and compete with the UFC, because now you have an international event where now you got a US, you got an England. To me, I think England is a great spot for someone to put something together like that, a huge production like that is something that I looked at and I think would be very, very interesting to be able to do that, because the English fans are going to follow a hometown production, and and I think it pushes each production to be great, because now you can't just sit on your laurels because you got nobody pushing you. Now you get somebody up there that's now the same level and is competing with you. Now you both challenge one another, and it makes you better.
Absolutely. Ken, I've now got to ask you, this is a topic which is, of course, there's been a lot of uproar about it. Celebrities, social media, people going into boxing, MMA, combat sports. You trained in it for so many years. You're a pioneer. What are your thoughts about these guys going in for white collar events? Jake Paul does my head in, by the way. I can't stand him, but he can sell himself. But it's just, I'm a purist of the combat sports, boxing especially. So, yeah, your thoughts on these guys coming in? They're not professionals.
You can't hate someone for making money. I mean, you could be jealous. You can't hate success. And, that's what it is. He's had success at what he's doing. And I think because of the social platforms that now everybody has, we should be learning from this. We should be going, wait a minute, if this guy can do it, I could do it in this thing. So there's so many opportunities out there for people to make money for themselves if they just put their minds to it. Now, do I agree with what he's doing and how he's doing it now? I think that, calling yourself a professional boxer means that you got to be a professional boxer. You got to put yourself in that position. So obviously that's something I think that has to do more with commission and how they sanction these fights. At that level, it has nothing to do with him. He's doing what he's able to do, and you can't fault him for that, because the door's open for him. He's going to do it. I would. I mean, if I was him and making all that money, I'd do it. So it's got to be some regulations and stuff put in there that says, okay, yeah, you can do it, but you can't call it a professional match. It's not a professional match. It's an amateur or an entertainment event or whatever they want to do, but it can't be in the rankings. And I don't know if that's the case or not, but they're still in their promotions. It's a professional boxing match. And I think that that's the only thing that I would probably say that I don't like, is that it should make sure that it's known that this is a celebrity match or that it's an amateur match, but it's not a professional boxing because he hasn't done the things to be a professional. Now, the way he's doing this, I got no issue with him jumping on and using platforms and fighting guys that are older and that, maybe past their prime. He's making good moves and he's making a lot of money. God bless him. But I think it's up to the sanctioning body in boxing or in the combat sports to make sure that it's listed properly, so you're not insulting guys that have put 20 years in their craft. And you got somebody that's saying they're a professional fighter when they haven't done that yet. And I think that's what's rubbing some boxers wrong, is that he's being put in a category of a professional boxer when he hasn't done that. So I just think that that's it. I think that we all got to get off our high horse and realize that just because it's being said that they're fighting and he's got 4-0 or whatever it is, a pro boxer, whatever it is, I think we just got to stop reading all that stuff and just enjoy what you're watching. It's entertainment. Watch it, enjoy it for what it is. It's entertainment, and I'm going to watch this. I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to have fun with it, and I'm not going to knock the guy for doing it because his bank account is huge. So can't knock that. You love what he's doing. There's a lot of great things that he's done that we can all learn from in our own businesses on how we can put ourselves in better position.
I've got to be fair to him promoting Amanda Serrano and Katie Taylor for the boxing, who was in with Eddie Hearn. He articulates himself well in the promotional sense. I like that. But I like how you encompass that there, the pros and cons of it. But I thought Anderson Silva was going to win that because he beat Chavez Jr. I couldn't believe it. I'm about as good at predicting as Chael Sonnen, though. My predictions are so off. But I thought Anderson was going to put him to sleep. I really did,
I told him that before that fight that I thought that Anderson Silva would probably get knocked out.
Right, okay.
And so I because I'm a fighter, because I know when you hit your wall as a fighter, as an older fighter, you're not going to beat most people. The fight's out of you because you fought for so long. It's not, you don't have that excitement, you don't have that energy level, your body doesn't work the same. And so that most people can walk in, amateurs can walk in and beat you because you don't have the desire to win. And so I think that's where Anderson was. And that's why I called it. I said, I think he's probably going to get knocked out. Wouldn't surprise me if he got knocked out. Because, Jake, he's hungry and he's big, he's strong, he hits hard. And so I don't know if people know this, but just because you're not a professional boxer don't mean you can't get knocked out. You get knocked out by anyone who can hit hard, and he hits hard. So I think a lot of people are overlooking the fact that this isn't like, going against somebody that's in their prime that's 20-0 and he beats them. He's going against people that used to be good, and we've lost the fight. We don't have the desire to win or to go out and do this. And he is a very athletic and he hits very hard. And so this guy, if he put his time in 2, 3, 4 more years, he could get where he wants to go and fight a ranked fighter. I truly believe that because he's got the desire, the hunger, the athletic ability to do it.
Thanks for that, Ken. No, it's good. It's good hearing your insight on it, being a fighter at the end of the day. And yeah, absolutely. I've got to ask you, what about the Gypsy King, Tyson Fury? It's that we didn't get Joshua and him fighting down in London. An absolute travesty. But what are your thoughts on him, and what he's managed to do?
I think he's one of those kind of guys that you look at, you don't think much of until he puts his fists on you. And then you realize it. Wait a minute. Or you hit him and he walks through it. Yeah. So he's a beast. There's no question. He's got a fighter's mentality. He's got a fighter's heart. Desire. I would love to see him in a bare knuckle fight because it's got to be in him. I mean, like he's got to have that desire to want to show people that not only can he fight with gloves on, but he can fight without gloves on. Like he could be that gypsy fighter.
What do you think about them not being able to pencil it in and get it done with him and Joshua? And we know obviously Usyk's there to unify into next year. He wasn't ready for it. It's an absolute failure for the fans, I think, that, Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn can't mesh it together. And Bob Arum as well. Bob Arum's obviously involved. It was a travesty that isn't happening in December. He's going to hammer Chisora. He's fought Chisora twice. He's an animal, Chisora, but it's the same outcome. But it's just a shame for the fans, I think, that we're not getting the fight that we've wanted for years domestically and the numbers it can do potentially.
Well, this might even make it for a bigger event if they do get it put together, because it didn't happen the first time, and so people are anticipating it. So if they can get it to happen later, I think now you've even gained more attention and more angst for it to happen. So you never know. Maybe this is just a strategic plan to really build the fight more.
Absolutely. Where do you see Usyk? He's gone up the weights, fighter's perspective. Do you think he's got a chance against Fury? I know he's more, he's got all different styles, but I just feel he made Joshua look bad. Joshua couldn't establish the jab, being the bigger man. And it happened in the second fight. I think Fury will be too much for Usyk. How do you feel with him?
Yeah, I think Tyson, he's got tremendous pressure. He pressures you, and he could take a punch, and he hits hard. So it's not like you're going to be able to outpoint him, stick him, move, do any of this. He's going to constantly keep pressuring him. You may win 1, 2, 3, couple rounds in the beginning, but I think as those rounds move on, he's just going to dominate.
Absolutely. No, I'd like to hear about the boxing as well from you. That's cool. Now, I'd be remiss not to ask about Valor Bare Knuckle VBK. You got the t-shirt on there, Ken. The legalization of bare knuckle. And yeah, I've got to ask you, this is current now, Ken. So yeah, just how that's come to be, and where you're going to be going with that. Great. I'm learning to like bare knuckle. I thought this is a bit too barbaric for me initially with the other companies, but I'm learning to like it, Ken.
Yeah, it's again, I think the uncomfortableness is just like the UFC when it first came out. It was no holds barred. People were uncomfortable with it because the only thing they see it was when someone was trying to kill each other on the street. So it was hard for people to watch it because they thought it was too violent. But in reality, it's your long-term damages are a lot less because you don't get to hit somebody as many times, and you'll hurt your hand if you don't hit them right and you hit them too hard. So for me, I think that I've always understood, because I've done all of it and I understand what's safe and what's not for me. I think it's just educating the people. But we did our first bare knuckle event, the Valor bare knuckle event, in 2019, and it was huge. I mean, the response that we got, because of the vision I had with this, I didn't want to be like other bare knuckle events. I wanted to come out and be different. But if I was going to be different, I wanted to figure out how I could make it better and be different. And so some of the things that I had gone through early on in my career, understanding some of the I guess with the frustrations for the fans, was like when they were sitting down on the floor, they bought those good seats. They were constantly trying to look around fences and ropes and turnbuckles and different things that were going on. It was hard to see. And you bought these tickets that were supposed to be good. And so I thought to myself, how do I make that more a visual explosion for fans? And so I came up with this thought of like, okay, what if we took the ropes down? What if we took the cages down and we just kind of sunk the flat surface down a little bit, so you had a slant on the edges, so the fighters would know where the out of bounds was, and that way fans wouldn't always have to be looking through anything to get a better experience, a viewing experience. And so we did that, and I had to think, well, how would that be for fighters to be able to stay in and fight? And I remember my own experiences, because I've fought a long time, and I thought to myself, I've never had to be told to fight or told to stay inside the cage or the ropes. So I thought to myself, that shouldn't be an issue, because if guys know there's nothing for them to back up into, they're going to circle, and they're not going to be able to escape by bouncing off the ropes or bouncing off a cage or laying on a cage to be able to rest for a minute and just counter somebody. You have to continually keep using footwork and fight. And so I thought, we're going to do that. I think we'll see how it works out. Didn't know. We just did it just to see what it would do. And then I also said, okay, in a stand-up fight, when you're in there fighting and watching boxing, what's the most boring thing or frustrating thing that you see in a boxing match? And I thought to myself, I kept thinking, yeah, okay, the clinch. Like, that is so frustrating when Mike Tyson would start unloading somebody, they grab him, like the Holyfield fight. They grab him. Every time you start to get off, and I said, you know what? We're going to take out clinching. Force fighters to fight in the inside or move. So we took out clinching. The next thing was that frustrated me when they put gloves on MMA fighters. It frustrated me to no end after about 6 months and understanding after they kept telling everybody that they were trying to protect the fighters. It was frustrating because the way they sold it was they were trying to protect the fighters from taking, head damage. Well, after I was in it for about 6 months, I was like, that's not true. That's like, now you're basically putting something on a hand that's padding it. So you're not protecting the fighter's head. You're protecting the fighter's hand. So he can hit you more times, and he doesn't have to be accurate with his striking and not damage his hand. And so that was frustrating for me. And I always said if I could do something when I would do a promotion of my own, that's the first thing I would change, was I would go back to God-given talent, like bare knuckle, no tape, no gloves, because now it forces fighters to have to be accurate and not throw haymakers or big bombs and then get bailed out if they miss and hit them in the head and not do anything to their hand. It's like literally you would break your hand if you throw bombs in haymakers and miss your target. And so that was one thing I took out that. Once we did the event, we did our first event, not knowing whether fighters would fall out of the ring or how it would work. But in my mind, I was like, no way. Fighters are fighters. They come to fight. And so we did the event, and it was unbelievable. The visual, the explosion, the visual explosion that you got to see, it was unbelievable. And, of course, then COVID hit, and we had to make some adjustments because I didn't want to do fights without the fans in this case, this type of case. So we started working on social platforms. We changed our direction a little bit. So now we're literally on the verge of relaunching our fights coming up. January 7th, we're doing our launch party, which is I'm going to be on the Valor app. So go to valorbk.com, or you can go to our Instagram on Valor. We have an app. On January 7th, I'm going to be sitting down and watching our first fights with everyone that wants to come in and watch it with us. And then we'll be making our announcements on our next upcoming events, things we're going to be doing in the future, so that everybody will be involved with that. Again, like I said, Instagram and Valor, or you go to valorbk.com. And on January 7th, we're going to be doing our launch party. So you guys can come join us then. We'll be making all our new announcements on our fighting events coming up and our vision moving forward. So, but I also, too, want to talk about the guys that really helped me get here. And there's a lot of them. I can't name them all. There's a lot of people behind the scenes, but there's just a few guys I want to name. Maddie, Miranda, who, and also Todd Middendorf. I came to them with my vision. And, obviously the vision and stuff like that's great, but I got to have somebody be able to get it out to people. Like, I have to be able to show this vision that I have. And so I remember going to Maddie, who was a longtime Lions Den member, along with Todd, longtime Lions Den member. Maddie has pretty successful businesses in a lot of different areas. So I came to him and asked if he could help me put this business plan and everything together. And he said, yeah, especially after the first fight, man. He was like, dude, this is like lightning in a bottle. And so he jumped on, built our business plan. We're moving forward now. I'm really happy where we're at right now, the energy and everything we've got. Todd, he's been in this fight game. He was training with Jerry Bolender way back when in Napa. And so he's been in it a long time, knows a lot of fighters, has done a lot of promotions himself. So I brought him in to kind of put that show together so that we were able to experience this vision I have. Steve, who is doing all our tech stuff. I mean, he's doing a great job on that. Andy doing the marketing, all the new age marketing stuff that we've got going on. So appreciate that. He's doing a hell of a job there. We've only seen the tip of the iceberg with what these guys could do with the tech and the marketing. And I look forward to seeing where that goes. Ted, Ted K, who is my manager, also has a lot of connections, very involved with putting a lot of these things together, helping build the team. So he's really very valuable We have two Alexes, Alex Nace, Alex Houlihan, who've done the NFTs, the cryptos, that whole connection stuff in there. They've done a great job. And then Nick, who does our production, great job there. He's out of Florida, so really, really got a great team. There's a lot of other guys that I just can't go through them all, but just I've been blessed. I really got a great team. A lot of stuff we've done and trying to put this together. You know, me coming from the fight world, doing everything I did in the fight world, being champion, building my own business there with the fight team and the Lions Den. But, man, when I tried to jump into this, man, there was a lot of things I didn't know. And so having this team behind me, being able to pick up some of the pieces that I shattered along the way to keep this thing moving forward is very appreciative. And so I really look forward to the future. I think right now we're in a good place. And I really, really, really want the fans to see what we got. January 7th, man.
I look forward to January the 7th, Ken. I'll be watching, absolutely. And great, the team and the ethos of the team that you've got, and thanking all them guys, man. You know, the sum of its parts, Valor, the team that you've got behind you, amazing, amazing. Ken, we've got fans' questions. There is loads. There's MMA-based ones, there's pro wrestling ones. And the first one I'm going to ask you about is Chris Hume had you on Big Fight Weekly earlier in the year, around the summer. And he wants to ask about Tito because he couldn't get round to it. You covered a lot. And he wants to just say, working with Tito on The Ultimate Fighter. And yeah, just, was it real, the disdain for Tito Ortiz? I think that's what he's after finding out.
Yeah, me and Tito had some heat. We were definitely going after one another. But it was my nature that anybody that I fought, I always tried to get into them. Because it helped me prepare to fight them. By nature, I like people and I want to help people, and I don't have that tendency to be angry at people. I want to be nice to them, right? But when I was fighting, I had to build that so that when I went in to fight them, that I had nothing but anger and frustration to fight them, and I had to have that, or otherwise I wouldn't go in there and really do my job. So every fight I went into, I tried to pick on somebody just to find out something that bothered me about him. And Tito was a great opponent for me because I didn't have to look very deep, because he gave me all I needed to not like him at different things, because we were both good at building fights. And we would go, and he was the same way. He got into people and, same kind of deal. So I thought we were really, really well matched together, especially during that time when UFC was struggling. We were able to really build those numbers up and create an awesome momentum change.
Absolutely. Bisping was on that Ultimate Fighter as well. He wanted to know your thoughts on Michael Bisping. Fantastic what he managed to do. You know, he was carrying it on his own to a certain extent over here for a long, long time. And just your thoughts on Bisping. I know he was on Tito's team. He selected him. But he wanted to know about Bisping, your thoughts on him and his career and him going into the Hall of Fame with UFC.
Yeah, Bisping was a very, very talented kid. And it wasn't that he was just a guy that was born with talent. He worked at it. I mean, he put himself in a position to win because he worked hard. He put himself in the right positions to get things done. And then when he got his opportunities, he made the most of them, just like with the reality fighter. You know, he may have not have been the best guy there, but he worked harder than anybody. Mm-hmm. He put himself in best position to be able to beat guys that may have had more skill sets than him at that time. But because of his work ethic and his desire to win, he pushed himself to that level. And and his character, he's a good guy.
Absolutely. So cool. When he finally got the belt, when he beat Rockhold, I was made up. I was elated, all that years of trying to get to it. And yeah, fantastic career he's had. Now back onto wrestling. And this is from my good friend, Mike Angus. My favourite has got to be the Val Venus versus Shamrock match with Billy Gunn as ref. Ask him, how was it working with Ryan Shamrock? And he's put in quotation marks, slap me.
Yeah, I think everybody heard that. Slap me. Yeah, I think she forgot the spot because we were standing for a while and I kept saying, slap me. So, but it was I enjoy working with those. Billy Gunn was a good friend of mine. We used to travel together, me and Road Dogg, and also Ryan Shamrock, who played my sister. We all traveled together. So we were pretty close. But Val Venus is another great hand. at that time. Again, we had a lot of great guys there. Some of the guys that weren't starred in main event matches could have been main event anywhere else. We just were loaded, and Val was one of those guys that had a lot of talent. Again, we were just stacked. So a lot of us never really got the title shot or a title run because of that. Not because we weren't good enough. It was just so many good guys.
Absolutely, absolutely. David G asks, which two modern day wrestlers, and I think he means pro wrestlers. No, it's wrestlers, MMA. Wants to ask who could come and compete in a Lions Den match. No, it is pro wrestling, sorry. My mistake.
Yeah, it's hard to say because I think when you're looking at pro wrestling, you truly don't know the talent, the aggressive talent someone has until you put them into a tryout. So I really couldn't tell you that unless I actually could see guys, go after one another in a training session. Then I could tell you whether or not they could be go into a Lions Den match.
I loved the Lions Den match as well when they brought it over. It was amazing. Yeah. When being younger, never seen it before. It's like, what is this? Obviously seen the cage matches, the traditional David. I was like, what's this? What are we going to see? They were amazing. It was so cool. It was so cool bringing that over to the pro wrestling game, man.
I loved it, especially when they told me about the idea. I had to come up with some of the design. Mm-hmm. I wanted the slant because they were going to put it straight. And I was like, man, this could be hard to work in if we can't use the actual cage, So we developed the slant a little bit. The walkway on top I thought was very creative and more of a movie type atmosphere where you could have the refs walk the top. So kind of like you're stuck in prison watched by a guard. Death match. Then putting weapons at the top in the second time that we used it. We actually with black men, we put weapons up. So it was really creative and really awesome to be a part of that vision, being able to help make that come real. And it was great. I'm shocked that we haven't seen it since.
Then they've done it. NXT, I think, have done it. Daniel Cormier was the ref, so obviously.
Oh, did they do it? Did they do it?
Yeah. Riddle. No, actually, it was on the main card. It was Extreme Rules. Sorry, again, I'm making mistakes here. It was Seth Rollins and Riddle. Obviously, Riddle coming from the MMA, and Cormier was the ref. It was main roster. Sorry, my mistake.
Wow.
So they recently, Ken, you'll have to check that out.
Yeah, well, I knew they were doing it. I didn't know they were going to do it in that cage.
I loved the fact Cormier was in as the ref. I thought that was a cool addition, how much he loves pro wrestling.
Right, yep.
I'm going to extend now. Obviously, you made light of Steve Blackman. And Roman asks, how tough was Steve Blackman? I know it's... how tough was Steve Blackman?
Yeah, Steve is legitimate. I mean, he was a guy that nobody wanted to mess with. But he was a nice guy. Like, he was genuinely a nice person. When you walk up to him, a lot of people probably were afraid of him because he didn't talk a whole lot. But when you got to know him, man, he was a really nice guy. But he wasn't the kind of guy that would really talk a whole lot. He was more kind of by himself and, wouldn't mingle a whole lot. But once you got to know him, man, he was a good dude.
Mike Roberts asks, what were your thoughts on Vader? We spoke about Vader in the 97 portion of your WWE run. But, yeah, he wants to know just a bit more on Vader. Yeah,
Vader was a tough dude. I mean, like, for a big man, he moved really well. He moved fast. He was quick. And he was big. I mean, he could do all kinds of things that small men could do. So I was really impressed with his athletic ability, as big as he was. And he was a nice guy.
Absolutely. Now, John Matthews asks, another cheeky one would be, how did he feel about his WWF entrance music? Personally, I believe it's one of the most underrated themes ever. Great to run to and go to the gym to. So I love the entrance music. It's up there as one of my favorites, Ken.
Yeah, they did it. I thought they did me really well with that because I agree. I think besides probably Stone Cold's, I thought that mine was right there with it. I thought it was just really well put together. Very exciting. Pumps you up.
I wanted to do the thing to my head. My dad caught me one day, actually. It's what you're doing. I said, it's what Ken Shamrock does. And he obviously knew who you were. He's like, right, okay. So, yeah, I was doing it into the mirror one day as a youngster. So there you go. There you go. Adam Roberts asks if you could bring any rule back from Pride to the UFC, but I think obviously modern promotions as well, what would it be? That's what Adam Roberts asks.
Yeah, I'm not much on rules. I'm not sure that. Honestly, I think that if there was one thing that I probably would bring back, because I think it tested everybody's cardio, was that I would rather do the 10-minute first round, 10 minutes, and then go into the 5. Because I think that it separates the guys that are in great shape and the guys that are not.
Okay. No, that's good answer. Hugh Roberts, a friend from Wales here. Are you still in touch with the guys that were training at the Lions Den back in the day? Obviously, you've said about Valor and the guys involved from the Lions Den. And he thinks Guy Mesger still a trainer there, but the likes of Jerry Bolander he's asking about as well in his question.
Yeah, I don't have much contact. We every now and then we'll hit each other on text, or we'll see somebody in crossing. Like Vernon, I just the other day got a text from him. Guy is always there. I haven't talked to him lately, but I know he's always there. Jerry Bolander, I think it's been a year, but through social media, we still stay in contact. So there's a lot of them still there. Every now and then I get contacted by them, or I'll see them in crossing. Mm-hmm. Just like anybody in life, man, you don't stay in one place. You constantly keep growing and moving forward, or at least you should. And then things change around you as you start growing and improving your lifestyle, improving your financial situations. You keep improving and keep moving up. And sometimes your people that you started with at point A, you're not as close to or around when you're at point C. They're all off doing their own things, but you're still there, and they'll always be there if you need them. You'll always remain friends and connected for life. You'll always, if you ever need them, they're there, and vice versa.
Cool. No, nice answer, Ken. Nice answer. Justin Clapper from Justin Clapper's Pro Wrestling Show. I want to ask the mindset from MMA to pro wrestling. Has he ever had a moment in wrestling where he got lost in the moment and maybe brought it a little harder than he should have? Good question, Justin.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Vader being one of them. Whereas that we were going so well that I remember throwing a knee, and he ducked down at the same time I threw a knee, and I broke his nose. So, yeah, we have those moments, but we're professionals. We realize that we still have a job to do, and we got to make sure we get it done. And so, Vader was a real professional. I mean, never had an issue with him. He never catered me. Although most people think he did, but he never did. He was always good. He made everything look vicious and aggressive, and that I appreciated.
Good question, that, Justin. I like that one. My friend Tom Perrett as well. What was his feelings at WrestleMania 14 making The Rock tap?
Yeah, it was, again, one of the matches that was always something special for me, is being able to throw the lock on and making him tap. And then, of course, having the time where we did the match where it actually went in a reversal. So a lot of great experiences with The Rock and finishes that we were able to put together.
Wesley Stover over in the US of A. What is his favorite memory of his wrestling NWA TNA? Because I wanted to lead this one. Obviously, your TNA run got the NWA title, the first guy to get it in TNA. So, yeah, great question. What was his favorite memory of wrestling there?
Yeah, I got a couple of them. I would say probably the TNA thing, capturing the Intercontinental title, the tag team title, even the Rookie of the Year, Most Improved Wrestler. I mean, I did it all. It was like a lot of special moments. And I would say the one that probably ranks up there at the top would probably winning King of the Ring and beating The Rock.
Yeah. Fantastic. Tony Simpson, this is the last fan question, Ken. If you had the choice, would you rather be WWF champion or have one last UFC title?
Yeah, both those. I do both. I'm not taking one over the other.
That's cool. That's cool. Thank you everyone for your questions for Ken. It was a good mix of both codes. It was cool. It was cool. And Ken, obviously, I think just one last plug for Valor Bare Knuckle before we go as well, of the January 7th event, and where the fans can find you as well away from Valor VBK.
Yeah, so it's called Valor Sports, but you can go to our website. It's valorbk.com, or you can go to our Instagram, which is Valor. Also, too, I have my own where you can find out everything that I'm doing also, which would be my Instagram is called Kent Shamrock Official. So, yeah, check it out, man. January 7th, man, we're going to do a launch party. Go to our Valor app and check it out, man. Appreciate you all. Thank you.
My guest today, UFC Hall of Famer, Feuds Hall of Famer as well. It's legendary MMA pioneer, legend of pro wrestling as well, Mr. Ken Shamrock, the world's most dangerous man. Absolute pleasure having you on Stu's Wrestling Podcast today, sir.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
That was an absolute honour having the UFC Hall of Famer, the Feuds Hall of Famer in pro wrestling, Ken Shamrock, on the show there. As you heard, Valor Bare Knuckle VBK, their next show will be on January the 7th. You could really hear the passion there from Ken Shamrock and the way they're doing their bare knuckle promotion differently to other people. So yeah, please look for them on socials, Valor Bare Knuckle VBK, and on their website too, you can find them. Thank you so much to Ken for all his insight on his career. A wonderful career. When you listen to all the different things that he has managed to do and he's succeeded in, it's amazing. What a career. And to do it in cage fighting and pro wrestling, that's just amazing. So good. Thank you everyone for your questions as well. You could really see Ken enjoyed answering them. And yes, this has been episode 135 with Ken Shamrock, the world's most dangerous man. And we'll see you very soon for episode 136. Take care.